Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we're going to explore who Black Phillip is. In the vast and shadowy landscape of horror cinema, few figures have managed to leave a mark as disturbing and profoundly unsettling as Black Phillip, the demon who lurks patiently and cunningly in the shadows of The Witch, the 2016 film that redefined modern horror. But we're not talking about just any antagonist. Black Phillip transcends the mere presence of a physical enemy. He is the very embodiment of evil that slowly infiltrates everyday life, a symbol of corruption, temptation, and betrayal that can lurk even within the safest confines of a family home. His power does not lie solely in the violence he could inflict, but in his ability to manipulate the mind, sow doubt, and exploit human weaknesses, becoming a dark mirror reflecting the deepest fears of those around him. His appearance as a billy goat is not an arbitrary choice. From European demonology, the goat has long been associated with the devil, witchcraft, and dark pacts. It is an ancient symbol that immediately evokes the forbidden and the fearsome. But in The Witch, this figure rises beyond simple iconography. It becomes the perfect mask for a shrewd, calculating, and silent being, capable of observing, influencing, and corrupting without raising suspicion. The combination of mystery, twisted intelligence, and imposing physical presence makes Black Phillip memorable not just as a demon, but as a character who embodies psychological horror in its purest form. Exploring his story, origins, nature, and supernatural abilities becomes almost a necessary experience to understand the dark force driving every event in the film. Black Phillip's connection with the protagonist family is as intimate as it is lethal. We are situated in March of 1630 in a strictly Puritan New England, when William, the patriarch, along with his wife Catherine and their children Thomasin, Caleb, and the twins Jonas and Mercy, are expelled from their community for accusations of lacking faith. William blames them for not being true Christians, for lacking authentic devotion, causing a definitive rupture with the place that had, until then, been their home. This historical context is not merely a backdrop. It reflects the religious paranoia of the era, the obsession with spiritual purity, and how these social tensions could create fertile ground for fear and superstition to emerge. Forced to start from scratch, the family builds their home in an isolated clearing, surrounded by a dense and seemingly endless forest. They set up a small, rustic house next to a plot of farmland that soon proves to be infertile, forcing them to rely heavily on livestock, including the seemingly innocent Black Phillip. By November, Catherine gives birth to her fifth child, Samuel, but life in this isolated place is far from idyllic. Crops wither, the soil is unproductive, and the family faces a constant struggle for survival. Black Phillip integrates into daily life with the naturalness of a domestic animal, yet his true nature remains hidden, a mystery laden with malevolent intent. Although the film never explicitly confirms it, it is suggested that William found the demon in the forest and brought him into the family home without understanding the real threat he represented. Thus, under the guise of a simple billy goat, Black Phillip observes with chilling patience, waiting for the precise moment to corrupt the family from within. His presence becomes a silent catalyst for paranoia, fear, and familial disintegration. Terror manifests in a heart-wrenching act that marks the beginning of chaos, while Thomasin innocently plays peekaboo with baby Samuel, an old and grotesque witch, servant of Black Phillip, emerges from the forest and swiftly carries the child away with supernatural speed. The action occurs with such subtlety that Thomasin barely has time to react. William organizes a desperate search, but Samuel disappears without a trace. The family tries to rationalize it, attributing his disappearance to a wild wolf. But the truth is infinitely more sinister. The child was sacrificed in a dark ritual. The witch, bathed in Samuel's blood, gains supernatural powers, including rejuvenation and levitation, symbolizing the beginning of the evil's dominion over the family and the corruption of the natural and divine order they so deeply revered. From this moment on, the disintegration of the family unit becomes inevitable. The twins, Jonas and Mercy, far from seeing Black Phillip as a mere animal, develop an unsettling, almost reverential bond with him. They venerate him, sing macabre songs to him, and proclaim him king of the world, crowning him symbolically and making him the absolute master of their young minds. The goat becomes an intermediary of evil, a dark confidant revealing forbidden secrets, including the truth about Samuel's fate, generating psychological terror that seeps into every corner of the family. In one of the most tense and disturbing scenes, while Thomasin plays with Caleb, Mercy bursts in, terrified, claiming that a witch took the baby, a fact confirmed by the goat. In a macabre and unsettling twist, Thomasin responds sarcastically that she herself is the responsible witch, that she delivered Samuel to Lucifer and danced with the demon in the forest. Her words, though seemingly playful, instill paralyzing fear in Mercy, who flees in panic, leaving Caleb terrified, aware that malevolent forces are already infiltrating his sister's psyche. From the very first hints, it becomes clear that Black Phillip is not solely responsible for the kidnapping and sacrifice of young Samuel. He is the invisible force that governs every misfortune, every shadow, and every fearful sigh within the family's life. The farm's infertility, the crops that wither relentlessly under gray skies, the barren soil, the sickened animals, everything seems meticulously orchestrated by this demon, always taking the form of an apparently harmless billy goat, whose black, penetrating gaze conceals centuries of concentrated evil. Every detail of his behavior reveals intelligence and patience. He never acts rashly, but observes, waits, and manipulates like a chess master, moving his pieces slowly, ensuring that each step the family takes leads them closer to their destruction. But Black Phillip's power extends beyond the visible. When he desires, he summons one of his most effective servants, a witch capable of taking the form of a rabbit, small and seemingly harmless, who reappears at strategic moments to provoke, confuse, and lure Caleb and William into the dark depths of the forest. This rabbit is no ordinary animal. It is a diabolical lure, a messenger of evil, preparing the ground for the physical and spiritual corruption that the demon intends to impose. Each encounter with this creature heightens psychological tension, amplifying fear and paranoia within the family. It is precisely this deception that drives Caleb to make a desperate decision. The misery his family endures, combined with the fear that his parents might sacrifice Thomasin as a servant to secure food, pushes him to act. At dawn, armed with his bow and heart full of hope and anxiety, he decides to go in search of the rabbit, convinced that capturing it could change everyone's fate. Upon learning of the plan, Thomasin insists on accompanying him, displaying a mixture of concern and courage that keeps her tied to her brother. Together, they venture into the forest, where light barely penetrates the trees, and the damp, cold air seems imbued with a silence heavy with foreboding. The unsettling animal reappears, and its mere presence unleashes tragedy. The rabbit, moving with supernatural speed, startles Caleb's horse, which panics and throws him off. Thomasin falls to the ground, hitting her head, and loses consciousness for a few moments. The feeling of helplessness intensifies when Caleb attempts to shoot the rabbit, but every attempt is thwarted, as if an invisible force guides his hands toward failure and misfortune. At that moment, his dog Fowler runs into the forest, and Caleb follows without hesitation, only to encounter a heartbreaking scene. The dog's body torn apart, and immediately afterward, an even more disturbing vision. The same witch who had taken Samuel's life, now transformed into a young woman of supernatural beauty, emerges from the underbrush, enticing Caleb with seductive gestures and calculated movements, each designed to draw him into the heart of evil. Under Black Phillip's orders, she attacks him brutally, corrupting his spirit and possessing his body, marking the culmination of terror and the loss of innocence. His soul becomes trapped, another pawn in the demon's dark game. Caleb's disappearance plunges the family into a whirlwind of despair. William finds Thomasin unconscious in the forest, trembling and covered in wet leaves, while Caleb has vanished without a trace. Back at the farm, Catherine, consumed by fear, pain, and guilt, begins to blame her eldest daughter for all the misfortunes, in a desperate attempt to find a tangible scapegoat. That same night, amidst an electric storm that strikes the land with fury, Caleb reappears in critical condition, staggering, soaked by rain, delirious, and violently convulsing. His body is a physical reflection of the spiritual corruption Black Phillip has imposed upon him. Terrified, Catherine insists that Caleb has been bewitched by a witch, but the truth is darker. His soul has been entirely possessed by the demon. Amid fevers, vomiting, and hallucinations, he expels a bloodied apple, a diabolical symbol of corruption, while professing his love for Christ in a final act of faith before succumbing to a tragic death, a sacrificial pawn in Black Phillip's malevolent game. Horror tears the family apart, igniting accusations and mutual distrust. The twins, Jonas and Mercy, guided by Black Phillip's whispers and promises, point to Thomasin as the culprit, accusing her of witchcraft and pacts with dark forces. Thomasin, however, maintains her innocence, identifying the black goat as the true source of misfortune. Tension reaches its peak when William, unable to endure further chaos and horror, confronts his daughter with fury and desperation, demanding a confession. Thomasin, with calm and terrifying clarity, describes Black Phillip's influence since his arrival, recounting how every misfortune coincides with his presence and how the goat represents the classic manifestation of the demon. Her words plunge William into a sea of confusion, despair, and fear. Overwhelmed by anger and helplessness, William locks Thomasin and the twins in the barn, alongside the livestock and the seemingly docile black goat. Within this confinement, the children seek comfort from each other, insisting that they do not practice witchcraft, nor have made dark pacts. Outside, William and Catherine decide the best course is to return to the plantation, convinced that misfortune has destroyed everything they tried to build. But Black Phillip, always cunning and omnipresent, has no intention of yielding. That very night, the goat orchestrates a direct and devastating attack. One of its witches subjects Catherine to terrifying visions, making her believe that her deceased children, Caleb and Samuel, are visiting her in a macabre deception, shattering her mind and spirit. Meanwhile, the witch bursts into the barn, feeding on the goat's milk before killing them brutally, and drags the twins into the forest, destined for dark and bloody rituals. At dawn, William discovers the magnitude of the tragedy. The barn destroyed, the livestock dead, and the twins' clothes scattered across the ground, a brutal testament to their cruel fate. Before he can react, Black Phillip lunges at him. The goat, until that moment seemingly docile, charges with brutal force, impaling him with its horns. William attempts to defend himself with an axe, but the demon's strength and his own physical exhaustion overpower him. Finally, he falls, crushed by a pile of firewood he had stacked himself, while Black Phillip finishes him off with cruel precision, retreating only when the family's destruction is complete, leaving behind a landscape of horror, death, and absolute despair. William's final moment of life is marked by absolute and crushing defeat, a collapse that takes not only his life, but everything that gave it meaning. His children, his family, even the faith that had sustained him until then. Helplessness surrounds him like a dense fog. He feels that every prayer, Every act of devotion has been futile in the face of the relentless domination of dark forces that have turned his home into a kingdom of misfortune. The blows of fate, which once seemed isolated, now intertwine into an inescapable pattern of destruction, and he realizes that his will, no matter how strong, cannot overcome what has been unleashed. Facing the imminent deaths of Thomasin himself and Catherine, whether by the succession of calamities that beset them or by the dark entities slowly consuming the farm, William finally lowers the axe. It is a gesture filled with resignation and faith. He surrenders, feeling that everything that has happened is inscribed within a greater will, even though the shadow of doubt and fear embraces him mercilessly. In that act of surrender, surrounded by darkness, he retains only a thread of God's presence within him, a final spiritual refuge amid total annihilation. But the tragedy does not end there. Catherine, seeing her husband's lifeless body and the extent of the devastation around her, loses her mind completely. Desperation and rage blend in her gaze, blinding her and transforming her pain into violence. Unable to distinguish reality from the nightmare enveloping her, she lunges at Thomasin with feverish accusations, insisting that her daughter is the witch responsible for all the family's misfortune. Between sobs and incoherent screams, she accuses Thomasin of attempting to seduce Caleb and even William, dragging them toward damnation with demonic intent. The intensity of her madness is such that each word seems to pierce the young girl's mind with daggers of terror and guilt. Overwhelmed but aware that her life hangs by a thread, Thomasin pleads for mercy, affirming her innocence in a trembling, fear-filled voice. Yet Catherine, completely consumed by madness and hatred, attempts to strangle her. In that moment of extreme desperation, Thomasin is forced to defend herself. The act is tragic and deeply human. In a survival instinct, she plunges a hook into her mother, ending her life immediately, but without true desire to kill. The mixture of horror, guilt, and relief leaves her exhausted, trembling, and breathless as she contemplates the outcome of her desperate action. Shattered, vulnerable, and powerless, Thomasin takes refuge in the barn, a space that now represents both safety and confinement. She changes her clothes, attempting to rid herself of dirt and the memories of recent violence, and allows herself to cry for what seems an endless time, sobs absorbed by the damp wood of the barn. Eventually, she collapses into a restless sleep, where nightmares and memories intertwine in a whirlwind of anxiety and guilt. But the night has not finished with her. Upon waking, she senses a sepulchral silence enveloping the farm, a silence broken by murmurs emerging from the nearby stable. A feeling of presence pierces her. She instinctively knows she is not alone. And then she sees him. Black Phillip moves among the shadows, his penetrating gaze and threatening demeanor unmistakable. In a voice blending softness and authority, he calls to her, reminding her of the power he always held over her twin siblings. The goat remains silent for a moment, as if assessing her, before emitting a deep murmur that shatters the calm. "What do you desire?" Confused and terrified, Thomasin asks what she can offer. The creature responds with a seductive and disturbing voice, presenting the most unsettling temptation: to live delightfully, to taste forbidden pleasures, to wear beautiful clothes, to leave fear and misery behind. In that instant, the goat begins to transform. Before Thomasin's eyes, a tall man appears, dressed entirely in black, with a dark beard and a presence so somber it seems to absorb the surrounding light, projecting an aura of absolute power. He orders her to remove her clothes and sign his book. Nervous and trembling, Thomasin confesses that she cannot write. The dark figure, with a sinister paternal tone, assures her that he will guide her hand, promising that every stroke will mark her pact with power. Surrendering to temptation and the need to survive, Thomasin signs the book. She follows Black Phillip deep into the forest, where a coven of witches awaits her, gathered around a massive bonfire that illuminates the night with dancing red flames. They chant, dance, and celebrate in a ritual that blends ecstasy and horror, a ceremony symbolizing Thomasin's complete surrender to darkness. Slowly, she begins to rise, floating amidst the shadows, her euphoric laughter mingling with the creaking of branches and the nocturnal wind, while Black Phillip watches silently, satisfied. His work is complete. Thus reaches its climax, the story of this demon in the witch, a triumph of corruption over innocence. Behind this narrative, the character of Black Phillip deserves deeper analysis. His appearance, true nature, and abilities reveal that Robert Eggers created more than a mere antagonist. He crafted a being wrapped in mystery, a tangible manifestation of the devil himself, cunning, calculating, and patient. His intelligence is terrifying. He selects his victims with surgical precision, manipulates events at will, and assumes the form of a billy goat, a classic symbol of Lucifer, to infiltrate family life. Thomasin herself describes him to her father. Black Phillip whispered to the twins, revealing forbidden secrets and becoming the dark confidant of their young minds. In his animal form, Black Phillip is a corpulent goat, far larger than normal, with curved, sharp horns, natural weapons reinforcing his threat. His calm, inscrutable eyes project an illusion of innocence, making any violent movement appear sudden and more terrifying. In his human form, barely visible among shadows, he manifests as a tall, somber man dressed in black, with dark hair and beard, the classic man in black figure from diabolical folklore, whose mere presence commands fear and submission. His personality combines wickedness, calculation, and extreme intelligence. From the very beginning, Black Phillip focuses his attention on Thomasin, marking her as his future servant. Paradoxically, the young girl, noble and compassionate, is the most vulnerable due to her faith, morality, and grief over exile. Her rebellious spirit and innocence make her the perfect target for the demon's dark seduction, who manipulates every aspect of her destiny with patience, cunning, and cruelty, ensuring that her transition into corruption is inevitable and complete. From the very first moments of The Witch, it is clear that Thomasin carries deep doubts about her faith, doubts that mark her from her innermost core and shape every thought, every gesture, and even every prayer. She is not merely a frightened teenager with fleeting insecurities. Her spirit is fractured by the awareness that she might not be worthy of God's kingdom. She constantly questions whether her actions, devotion, and obedience are enough to reach heaven, or whether, on the contrary, she will be condemned for her supposed spiritual inadequacy. This relentless pursuit of forgiveness drives her to plead for Christ's mercy even before supernatural phenomena begin to manifest tangibly on the isolated farm. Her spiritual fragility and need for divine approval make her, from the very beginning, the perfect target for Black Phillip, a patient, cunning, and meticulously calculating being who begins to infiltrate the family's life silently, sowing chaos with the precision of a master manipulator who knows the weaknesses of every human soul. But Black Phillip's evil is not limited to tempting Thomasin alone. His malevolence spreads like an invisible poison, enveloping the entire family in a cycle of misfortunes and tragedies that tear them apart slowly from within. Each calamity seems carefully planned. The infertility of the crops, the loss of livestock, animals dying, the disintegration of family life. Everything functions as a cog in the machinery of evil that Black Phillip controls with millennial patience. His influence becomes even more evident when he induces hallucinations in Catherine, making her believe that her deceased children are visiting her during the night, breaking her mind and eroding her perception of reality. Black Phillip watches with delight as despair and sleeplessness consume her sanity, ensuring that every action moves toward the final goal without human interference. The demon does not only provoke external tragedies, he manipulates emotions, exploits human weaknesses, and generates internal conflicts with terrifying precision. Every confrontation among family members, every suspicion, every doubt, and every accusation arises from his hidden influence. He takes advantage of Thomasin's solitude and hopelessness, leaving her isolated after Samuel's death, Caleb's disappearance and possession, and the accidental murder of her mother. The young girl, broken and exhausted, feels that redemption has been denied to her, that God has abandoned her, and that she can never return to divine grace. It is then that Black Phillip extends his offer. He promises her a life delightful to the senses, to enjoy earthly pleasures and absolute freedom, drawing her away from a world that offers only condemnation, execution, and the burden of being responsible for all the tragedies. Trapped by anguish, despair, and isolation, Thomasin signs the demon's book, succumbing to darkness, abandoning hope for redemption, and surrendering to a destiny that Black Phillip has prepared with patience and cruelty. This arc reveals Black Phillip's cunning and cruelty, a being endowed with almost invincible supernatural abilities. Among them, shape-shifting stands out. He can appear as any animal in the environment or even assume a human appearance, a power that allows him to observe, seduce, and manipulate undetected. His influence also extends to a coven of witches who obey his every command. These allies participate in acts essential to consolidating his dominion: the kidnapping of Samuel, Caleb's possession, and the attacks that keep Catherine on the brink of madness, acting as physical and magical extensions of his power. Black Phillip also possesses the ability to induce deep and terrifying hallucinations, like those he imposes on Catherine, and to possess human beings, such as Caleb. He even controls the surrounding animals, using a rabbit as a decoy in the forest to distract and confuse, demonstrating that his intelligence and manipulation know no limits. Every action, every event, and every whisper is calculated to expand chaos, death, and corruption, and to recruit new followers into his service. The historical and cultural background of the film further reinforces Black Phillip's character. Robert Eggers, a native of New England, drew inspiration from local legends of witches, demons, and ghosts from places like New Hampshire and from the historic Plymouth Plantation, which he visited during his childhood. Fascinated and terrified by these stories, Eggers created a personal narrative reflecting the historical authenticity of the 17th century and the era's obsession with religious purity, superstition, and the condemnation of supposed sinners. The production of The Witch embarked on a rigorous journey to ensure historical accuracy, consulting museums, experts, and contemporary documents to reconstruct 17th century society. Every detail, from costumes, accents, and household utensils, to the structure of the house, farm, and plantation, was meticulously designed with historical guidance, aiming to immerse the viewer in a believable and tangible world, where every object and action makes sense within the context. The conception of Black Phillip was based on the historical belief that the devil could appear as a billy goat, an idea recurring in Europe during the Middle Ages and the 17th century. Originally, Eggers planned to reveal the goat's true nature sparingly, reserving the shocking twist for a key moment in the film. Ultimately, he decided to give the creature greater presence throughout the story, leaving subtle hints of its intelligence and malevolence, building tension and anticipation in every scene. Filming with the goat, named Charlie, was a constant challenge. His aggressive and temperamental nature caused incidents on set. He attacked several actors and crew members, including the actor playing William, causing muscular and rib injuries. Because of this, scenes with the goat were kept to the minimum necessary, filming only what was essential to maintain tension and preserve the narrative. thereby reinforcing Black Phillip's unsettling and memorable presence as one of the most terrifying and emblematic demons in modern cinema.